Every cell in the body uses glucose for energy, and the brain uses about 30% of all the glucose that comes in, so it's really affected by whether or not we have any glucose. Everything the body does is about whether or not you have any glucose. The muscle stores glucose, the liver stores glucose. The body doesn't want you to be out, and it has backup systems galore to make sure that doesn't happen. We get glucose from carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are described as either simple or complex, depending on how many single glucose molecules are kind of strung together to make up that sugar. So if we use simple sugar as an example for a moment, something sweet, candy, sugar, refined grain, it's a lot of glucose molecules, but they're not very attached to one another. So when we eat them, they break apart really fast, and all of that glucose comes at once into the bloodstream. Anytime glucose hits the bloodstream, the next thing that happens is the pancreas releases the hormone insulin. And insulin's job is to sort of go and park on the outside of all of the cells. And the only way that glucose molecule can get into the cell in order to be combusted into energy is if insulin is present, opens the door, escorts the glucose in. So insulin is a transporter of glucose. Because glucose is so important, the body wants to keep insulin and glucose really tightly regulated, because without insulin, there's no way the glucose can get into the cell. And without glucose, there's nothing for these delivery trucks to do, if you will. So if we use that simple sugar as an example, eat something sweet, breaks apart really fast, all of that glucose comes at once into the bloodstream. Well, the pancreas is designed to send the appropriate amount of insulin. So if a whole bunch of glucose comes in, a whole bunch of insulin gets released, and it goes and parks on the outside of all of the cells, and the glucose that used to be the something sweet gets taken up very rapidly into the cell. Instant energy, just what I needed. But it wasn't a meal, and it wasn't really even all that much glucose, so the pancreas kind of overshot the amount of insulin that was required. And because the body wants to keep that tightly regulated, the message to you will be, find more glucose, please. Preferably that same sweet thing that we just had. So you get a craving for something sweet. And you might go get something sweet, but even if you don't, and here's really where the trouble begins, the body is going to manage this for you. And what the body's going to do is find some glucose. And where it's going to find it, it's going to pull it from the muscle, because the muscle glucose is really available. And because of that, the muscle also feeds the brain, and now here these other cells are borrowing from the muscle to balance themselves out, and the muscle really only holds so much. So let's say one day you've got this excess insulin, and you're not bringing in any glucose, and the muscle is out, so there's nothing to lend, there's nothing to deliver. Next day, excess insulin, nothing. Well, the body's really efficient. If these receptor sites keep getting called to attention and there's just nothing happening, they get downregulated. They sort of get laid off in a way because they're not being used. So the next time glucose comes in and insulin is released, now there are fewer parking spots. So some of the insulin parks there, but not all of it, because these doors aren't open. So now you've got excess insulin that's floating around in the bloodstream. Some glucose gets pulled into the cell, but not all of it, because these doors aren't open. So now you've also got glucose floating around in the bloodstream. And anytime there's glucose in the bloodstream, what does the pancreas do but sends more insulin trying to get that glucose somewhere? So more and more receptor sites are getting saturated with this insulin. It's taking a much bigger insulin release just to move this little bit of glucose into the cell. And now you get all these receptor sites with nothing to deliver. So the message gets even stronger. Get glucose, get glucose, get glucose. Other things begin to happen. And by the way, this is sort of a pre-diabetic state, because the pancreas is not designed to send so much insulin out all the time that it kind of exhausts itself. It can't really keep up. So we've got insulin and glucose floating around, and that's not supposed to be in the bloodstream. So the backup system for that is our fat cells. Our fat cells have a lot of insulin receptor sites. So over to the fat cell marches the insulin, and it pulls that glucose into storage. So now we're storing calories and we're hungry all the time. Meanwhile, the cell over here really only has about half the amount of energy that's required to operate optimally. So to this cell, there's a shortage. There is some sort of glucose famine going on. And what the body does when there's not enough is to downregulate your metabolism so that you burn more slowly this minuscule amount of glucose that seems to be coming in, when actually that's not what's happening. you're storing some and now burning some slowly. And so your whole metabolism kind of gets turned on end. And I use simple sugar as an example, but there are two other things that cause this overshooting of insulin. One is the cloth that we are cut out of. Genetically speaking, some people are just more vulnerable to this disruption or this dysregulation. And then the other thing is stress. That sympathetic nervous system, when you are fleeing or fighting, you're going to need a lot of energy to skedaddle or flee or fight. So the pancreas just starts sending out insulin, getting ready to get all of that glucose out into your limbs. So the strategies for this re-regulation, in a way, is sort of threefold. One is exercise and movement. Exercise kind of wakes these guys back up. Downshifting out of the stress response with meditative or mindful sort of practices, and the manner in which we eat. Blood sugar regulation, what and why, maybe.
Great.
And then blood sugar regulation, how. Okay.
So the how is the second one?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay, so it's just some guidelines.
Yep.
Does that seem okay?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you did a great job.
Okay, all right, okay.
Really good. Yeah.
And just,
I
if
learned
you
a
want,
lot.
if you want any titling for who you are and stuff like that, can you just say your first and last name and spell both for me? And then if there's any credentials you want Brian to put on there, if you could just state those.
Oh, okay.
So this is off record, but just for his record for editing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then do you want me to just go in the second half?
Yeah, that's fine.
Do I give an opening to it as if it's another video?
I would, if these are going to be two separate ones, I would say, that you're Carolyn Denton and that this is the
Part two of
this is the second part of blood sugar.
what to do about it.
What to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I am Carolyn Denton, Carolyn, D as in David, Enton, licensed nutritionist, or LN.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, second video. All right, we're ready.
Maybe I should have a sip of water.
Sure.
Yes. Oh goodness.
Here we go.
Same spot?
Yep, you look good. Same spot. All right.
Right.
Ready.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Denton, licensed nutritionist, and this is part two of blood sugar regulation, the sort of what to do about, or how to go about balancing blood sugar. So, we talked about simple carbohydrates, and now we're going to talk.
Start again.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah, that'd be fine. What? You didn't get it? Anyway.
I forgot the press report.
Okay, so what am I saying? Okay,
You can start right at, this is part two.
okay. So this is part two of blood sugar regulation, the how. What to do, how to regulate your blood sugar. We talked already about simple.
So what would we title the first section? Blood glucose,
Yeah, what and why.
what and why?
Were my hands shaking too much?
No. I didn't
Okay.
notice.
I did
Okay,
notice.
okay.
So what would you recommend the full title be for the first one, Carolyn?
Blood sugar regulation, what and why, maybe.
Great.
And then blood sugar regulation, how. Okay,
So
so,
the how is the second one.
mhm.
Great.
Okay, so it's just some guidelines.
Yep.
Does that seem okay?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you did a great job.
Okay, all right, okay.
It's really good.
Yeah,
And just,
I
if
learned
you
a
want,
lot.
if you want any titling for who you are and stuff like that, can you just, say your first and last name and spell both for me? And then if there's any credentials you want Brian to put on there, if you could just state those.
Oh, okay.
So this is off record, but just for his record for editing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And then do you want me to just go in the second half?
yeah, that's fine.
Do I give an opening to it as if it's another video?
I would, if these are going to be two separate ones, I would say, you know, that you're Carolyn Denton and that this is the
Part two
this
of
is the second part of blood sugar.
what to do about
what
it.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I am Carolyn Denton, Carolyn, D as in David, Enton, licensed nutritionist or LN.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, second video. All right, we're ready.
Maybe I should have a sip of water.
Sure.
Yes. Oh goodness.
Here we go.
Same spot?
Yep, you look good. Same spot. All right.
All right.
Ready.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Denton, licensed nutritionist, and this is part two of blood sugar regulation, the sort of what to do about, or how to go about balancing blood sugar. So, we talked about simple carbohydrates, and now we're going to talk.
Start again.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah, that'd be fine. What? You didn't get it? Anyway.
I forgot the press record.
Okay, so what am I saying? Okay,
You can start right at, this is part two.
okay. So this is part two of blood sugar regulation, the how. What to do, how to regulate your blood sugar. We talked already about simple carbohydrates. Now we'll talk about complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates are longer sugars. There's more glucose molecules strung together, sort of like a kid's pop bead. So it takes longer just to break them down into single glucose molecules. They automatically come more slowly into the bloodstream so that the pancreas kind of has a better idea of how much insulin to send. And then if you add protein and fat to the complex carbohydrate, you slow everything down to a snail's pace because it takes so much longer to break apart the protein, and fat is very slowly metabolized that whatever you've had that's a carbohydrate kind of goes along for that ride. It gets delayed, comes trickling out, pancreas knows exactly what to send, all of that glucose gets pulled into the cell, no excess insulin, no excess glucose, no storage, no craving, and there's energy until the next time you eat. But eating in this way is fairly counterintuitive in the old calories in, calories out. And I'll give you two scenarios. Let's say somebody woke up in the morning and had a bowl of oatmeal with blueberries, and lunch was a big, big salad with a ton of vegetables and rye crackers. Snack in the afternoon might be a 100-calorie pouch of something, and dinner was stir-fry, brown rice, baked pear, glass of wine, and you think, wow, low fat, low cal, ate frequently, whole grain, lots of fruits and vegetables, really great. But for a quick sugar metabolizer who's under stress and dysregulated, that menu would be a disaster because there's no protein and no fat. So you would have the oatmeal and the blueberries at 7 a.m. By about 9:30, all of that energy is all used up and down goes your blood sugar. And you may or may not even get that cue. Like people who don't eat breakfast, it's not like their bodies are pestering them all day for food, because what the body does is compensate and borrow and keep you afloat, keep you operational. And then lunch rolls around, and that's a lovely lunch, but all of that energy from lunch, or much of the energy from lunch, is going to go back to the morning. You've got to restock the bank shelves, bring your blood sugar back up to where it was supposed to have been, and now you have enough energy to get to about 12:45 and down goes your blood sugar again. And either you're so tired that you'd like to lie down, or maybe there's something sweet in the vicinity, or caffeine, or something to get you going, or the body just compensates and picks up the slack and keeps you operational for the afternoon. Snack goes to early afternoon, dinner goes to late afternoon, and then there's no energy for the evening. And that's where most people have a very difficult time, like, eating a sleeve of Girl Scout cookies while you're preparing dinner, because you're just so hungry. The counterintuitive part is you would have an egg with the oatmeal and the blueberries. You would put tuna, tofu, chicken, something, beans on that salad. A snack in the afternoon might be goat cheese and a pear, and then you'd throw a protein into the stir fry. And it's calories and fat and calories and fat. And you'd think, if I'm trying to manage or lose weight, why would I add protein and fat? But what that protein and fat does is slows down the delivery of that energy, and you make it to lunch and there's been no compensating or borrowing or storing, and then that energy can go to the snack, and snack goes to dinner, and then there's actually energy for the evening. The other scenario would be the opposite, but the same thing happens, and that's the low carb kind of diet, where there's, it used to be the Atkins and South Beach paleo. And so in this scenario, somebody might wake up in the morning and have a goat cheese omelet with a ton of vegetables in it. And then lunch would be chicken salad inside of a lettuce cup with jicama and carrots and other cut up vegetables. Snack might be almonds, dinner salmon, green beans, and a salad. And again, you'd think this is really good choices. But there's really no energy in there because the complex carbohydrates are fruits, whole grain, legumes, and vegetables are categorized as a complex carbohydrate, but they really don't hold a lot of energy. That's why in most diet plans they're free food. They don't count toward your energy balance in the day. So fruits, whole grain, legumes. So this goat cheese omelet with a ton of vegetables might get you to about 9:30, and then down goes your blood sugar. Body compensates and borrows, keeps you afloat, keeps you operational. You have the chicken salad and the vegetables, but there's no complex carbohydrate there. Same thing happens. The body borrows and compensates. And by the time you get to dinner, dinner's going to late afternoon and there's no energy for the evening. So you would add wild rice or brown rice to that, or have a piece of fruit and so forth, putting whole grain, legumes, or fruit into the rest of the day. The one last thing about this pattern of eating, really then, you eat about every 3 to 4 hours within an hour of rising, and every time you eat, you have protein, fat, and a complex carbohydrate, and vegetables. Also, we burn most of our calories by about 3 in the afternoon, and we eat just the opposite of that. We have a tiny little breakfast, soup, and then a lot of food at the end of the day. And it would be better to give that kind of a turn, to have a much bigger breakfast, big midday meal, mini meal, a supper. And that's how you would keep your blood sugar regulated with food, and you want to keep exercising. And learning how to meditate or do mindful practices will help as well.
Excellent. It's great.
Great. Good job, Carolyn.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
It makes sense to me.
So that's video 2 and 3 basically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Two.
basically.
Okay. Brian, you're just gonna edit those 2 separate videos,